Okay, gang, we're back continuing with our QSC Rogallo project. We've already built the fuselage in the previous two videos. Now we're going to build the sail frame. So you should have 4 3/16 square basswood dowels, and I've already got these there. Well, I bought them cut to 24 inches. If you had to buy a longer length, then you want to be sure and cut them to exactly 24 inches each. You're going to need 4 of them. A tool that I've got some other things up here. Some tools that might help you to facilitate this build. If you've got some clamps, those are good to have as we build. I've got several of these. These are my little cheapy Harbor Freight wood clamps, and they work real well. Also, you're going to need a square to help you build this thing as square as possible, and a couple of options here. I should have talked about this earlier when we were putting our vertical stabilizer on our horizontal stab, but this is just a simple plastic square that I bought at Walmart. I think it's real inexpensive. Of course, I showed you how to use our speed square as well when we put the vertical and horizontal stabilizers together, and you can also use just a simple carpenter square. Either of those will work. I like to use the speed square on this kind of stuff here, so that's what I'm going to use in my build. Your glue options here, if you have time to wait, your wood glue is going to work real well here, gluing these basswood spars all together, and also your medium CA. I don't know which one I'm going to use just yet. I'll probably use the wood glue on this. Well, what I want you to do to start off with is I want you to take 2 of your 3/16 square dowels, and on one of them I want you to find, see if I can show it up here. My camera is crummy, but right here we have a center point. That's our 12-inch mark. So you want to make a 12-inch mark on one of them to show exactly where the center is. And on the other one, I want you to measure back from one end all the way back, and I guess if I turn this back, I want you to make a mark at about 10 1/8 inches. Hopefully you can see that. That's going to help us to line up the cross spar on this. Okay, so once I've made those, I'm going to lay it out on my workbench, and I'm just going to basically, kind of eyeball it, but I'm going to glue those two together. I've got my spar, this is actually the cross spar, and this is going to be the spine. So we're going to come back with this cross spar. This is going to be the front. We're going to come back, and then there are 10 1/8 inch mark. That's going to be where we're going to position it. I want you to be on this side of it. You can do it this side, but that's going to change our wingspan a little bit. So I want you to glue it here, and you can use your speed square or whatever you have there to help you determine how square this is. And I can see from right there, I've got it ready to glue. It's perfectly square. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use, like I said, I'm going to use some wood glue on this and glue this up. Doesn't take a whole lot of glue here because we're going to go back, and I use too much again. I'm really good at that. But what I'm going to basically do is set that up where I want it to be. I'm going to use my clamp. And the good thing about working with our wood glue is that we've got a dwell time here. I'm going to use my speed square and basically just make sure that these are perfectly 90 degrees off from one another. And it looks like I'm pretty close. I'll probably tweak that a little bit. Need to pull the clamp off just a little bit. But this is our first glue joint. There we go. And I'll tell you what, I'm actually going to use this one to help me. A little bit less width. And once you get it perfectly square, like I've got it right there, then you can set it aside and let that dry, 20-30 minutes. Let that dry before we move on to the next step. We want that to be, perfectly set. Okay, now after my glue has set on our spar to our spine, I've got the spar side up. Real quick, I want to show you, and I don't know how well this is going to show up. Again, crummy camera. But I've taken my thread, just like we had done where we lashed the tail skid onto the fuselage. I've actually taken some black thread, and I've wrapped a few rounds this way, and then set that with some thin CA. You can use medium, but thin works best. And that just gives us a little bit stronger glue joint there. Just kind of lashes it together. That's going to be something we're going to use in a couple of our steps here. But you can see I've got my spine, and if I come 10 1/8 inch back from the nose of the spine, that's where you can see the back side of my spar that's going 12 inches in each way. The next step that I want you to do is with the spar up, like we have here, spars on top. This is eventually going to be on the bottom of the sail frame, but right now it's on top. And on the nose, again, that's the short side of our spine, I want you to take one of your 1/16 triangles, and I want you to glue it down and try to get this as square as you can. I've got the edges of the spine just touching the top side of the triangle. So I want you to glue that in place and let that set for a little bit, and then we'll move on to the next step. I'm going to do that again off camera. Okay, as you can see, right here I have my triangle for the leading edge glued in, got it square to the spar, and you can just eyeball it. If you're off a little bit, big deal. It's just an RC airplane, and it's a cheap one at that. But, you ideally want to get it as close as possible. Now you're going to take your third 24-inch spar, and we're going to lay a little dab of glue. Incidentally, on this sail here, I am using, just regular yellow wood glue. It works real well. But I'm going to lay a little glue down there, and I'm going to bring the spar in, try to flush it to this front side of this triangle here, and I'm going to glue that in place. I'm not going to put any pressure on this crossbar, but I do want to get this in position so that I'm fairly flush to that edge of the triangle. And as I come back here, this is the front edge of our spar and the back edge of our spar. We're going to line up that back corner with the leading edge of this spar. And we're going to glue that down there, and we're going to glue up here to our corner and let that dry. So I'll do that off camera. Once that's dry, we'll actually go through and do the other one. My workbench is not really big enough to facilitate, yours may not be either, but my bench is not really big enough to facilitate gluing them both up at the same time. So I'm going to glue this one up and glue the other one up, and then I'll join you back here and we'll go on to the next step. Okay, just as I said I would, I've got our leading edge spines, our spine and our two leading edges glued up. Glue's actually still a little bit wet, but it's set enough that I can handle it as well. You can see that we've glued our crossbar in place where the back of it is even with the front part of our leading edge there. The next step that I want you to do is glue on your remaining of your two triangles. Glue that on. Goodness. Just like that. And then let that dry. And if it overhangs just a little bit or under, again, no big deal. But glue that up. Again, I'm going to use yellow glue. Yellow wood glue. Okay, as I hope you can see from this, I've got my second 1/16 ply triangle on the nose, and now we're all sandwiched together. I can take my sanding bar here and carefully sand away any overlap or glue that's squeezed out if I want to. Kind of dress it up there, make it look nice. As such. And that makes for a pretty nice little deal, little point there. Also, I have gone through and I've used my thread and I've lashed our cross spar to our leading edge here and then again here. Okay, now that's got our sail almost ready to mount fabric. We've got one more thing we're going to do. One thing I want to point out real quick, our crossbar, our our spar is what it is. Well, we're going to take our two pieces that look like this, and the way these are going to go on is they're going to go on this side just like that. This is how we're going to mount our sail to our pylon. I hope you can see that. I want you to make note here that where our spar is on top of the spine piece, this is the bottom. You want to make sure that you note that, because if you try to build it the other way, things aren't going to work out right. So the spar on top of the spine, that makes, we're looking at this as the bottom right now, the bottom of the sail frame. Okay, I'm going to set this aside, set our frame aside, and there we go. The next thing I want you to do is to pull up these two pieces like you have here. Excuse me. And you'll see here that I've already got one. I hope you can see. I've got one with some marks on it. I don't know. There we go. They're starting to show up. Okay, what I've done is I've taken a piece of my 5/16. This is just scrap material. I say 5/16. 3/16 square dowel, just like we made our sail framework out of. And I've basically flushed it up and drew a line there. And as well, I've done it here and here. Okay, and that's going to tell us how that's going to fit to the sail and where we need to glue our additional pieces in. Now, taking this 3/16 square dowel scrap, I've cut two pieces here. I'm going to try to zoom in on this so maybe you can see this a little better. There we go. And what I've done here is, noting this angle, this is our spine, this top line here, but butting up against that, I've cut a piece of this 3/16 scrap that carries that angle, so that angle is here. And I've done another one. Let's see if I got a little bit of an angle there, I think. There we go, like that. And we're going to actually glue these pieces down. Now you want to take care, you can actually, we'll glue them just like that. And then once that's done, we can actually glue this piece to it as well, so we end up with a box like that. I just want to show you how this is going to fit. I'll grab our sail framework again. Remember, I'll have to zoom back out for this. You'll remember though that the spar goes on top of the spine, that signifies the bottom. And if I turn this, hopefully so that you can see it, this will slide in and it will glue to the side of the spar. Remember, this piece here would be in place like that. If I can hold that. And then this piece here, if I can find the angle that I put in, will go like that. That's how this is going to glue together. So what I'm going to do first, also I'll grab the fuselage. We can double check everything. Here's our little fuselage. I should be able to put this in place and line up those lines I made, and hopefully you can see this overlap here on the back side of the pylon is where we're going to have a piece glued in to strengthen it, and here as well, and then this is our spine. So that's kind of how that's going to go together. I hope that makes sense to you. We will, like I said, we're going to start off by gluing our pieces here in place as such. I'm just going to use my yellow wood glue on that, and then I'll glue this. Be sure that you leave enough space in here that when your pylon slides up, it's going to fit. You want it to be kind of a friction fit, if at all possible. You want it to be as close to a friction fit as it can be. Don't worry if when you're all done with this piece, when all these pieces are all glued up, if it's a little snug, don't worry about it, because you can actually take your sander and remove just enough material here on this side or on this side so that it will slide easily back and forth, off and on the pylon. So that's what we're going to do next. I'm going to glue this whole unit up, and then we'll do the next stage after that. So off camera, I'll glue these pieces together and show you how they look. While I'm waiting on this unit here to set up and dry, I've got it all glued together and so forth. I failed to mention something. If you bought 4 24-inch spars, basswood spars that are 3/16 square, and that's all you got, and you didn't have an extra piece like I had here, don't worry about it, because you'll remember you were using 3/16 thick balsa in order to make your pylon on this airplane. And if that's the case, just take a scrap of that 3/16 balsa and then use that on this assembly rather than using leftover 3/16 square basswood square dowel. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood that. If don't stop your build and run to the hobby shop and go get one 3/16 square dowel. You don't need to do that. Just use the balsa. That will work just fine, except for the fact that you're going to have to still measure out 3/16 to get the right spacing and so forth. And then you can always use just a piece that's wider and let it overhang, and then simply sand that down to the size that you need when you're done. So I just wanted to throw that out and let you know that that's certainly an option here. Because that's exactly what I did. Now, when I bought my 3/16 square dowels, I got them from Hobby Lobby, and I ended up getting 5 of them in a package, so I had an extra one. But depending on where you sourced this, if you didn't have any scrap left over and you bought them at exactly 24 inches, then that's perfectly fine to use a piece of 3/16 balsa left over from your pylon build after you cut that part out, and that'll work just fine as well. Okay, to conclude our build of our sail frame, we've got our finished pylon support that goes onto our sail frame, and I can just push it right down just like that. What I'm going to have you do here now, we're going to have to put some glue down. So with that in place, I'm just going to use my pen, and I'm going to make some marks here, just reference so that I can know how far to put the glue. And I'm going to make these marks here quickly. That's pretty good. Okay. Now, you're going to use your yellow glue. We're going to put a little dab here because we want to tie in this this piece of 3/16 square material here and here. So put a little dab here, a little dab here. And then we're going to put a little light layer on each side of the spine, like that. And then you'll push this into place. Remember, the spar is on the bottom of the wing, and we have the wing or sail frame upside down now. Now, before you leave that alone and just set it up with glue, go ahead and take your speed square or whatever you're using as a square and push it into place, and make sure, as this is all nice and flat, make sure that this mount here is perfectly square. If it's to one side or the other, when you glue it down, well, then your wing is going to be askew on the aircraft. It's going to be leaning to one way or the other. I'm not going to make a really big deal about the flight characteristics, but it's not going to look as nice. So, like I said, once you glue it, a dot of glue there, and then each side of the spine within the marks that we made, push that into place, set it square. You can clamp it. That's what I'm going to do. Just use some clamps to let it set up. And once you've done that, you've completed your sail frame. You'll want to pull up your fuselage. What I did, mine ended up being a little tight, so I took the sanding bar and sanded that ever so slightly, just enough to make it clear. And then I chamfered. If you don't know what a chamfer is, basically I just made a little bevel on, so I get it over here in the camera view so you can see, but I basically beveled the top of the pylon just a little bit to make sure that when I slide this up into the mount, I'm not fighting it from the get-go. I want it to be able to just slide straight in and make a friction fit where the top of our pylon is actually going to be butting up to the spine here and here. So glue that up, make sure it's nice and square, and then we're ready for the fun part, and that'll be mounting our sail.